In this video, we're going to show you how to install the lower control arm on your Honda Ridgeline located behind your front wheels. Using a 22mm socket, you can loosen and remove your lug nuts. Once you have your lug nuts removed, go ahead and grab that wheel, remove it, and set it aside. Now with the wheel off, we're going to go ahead and separate our sway bar end link from our strut. In the center here is a number 5 Allen key. May or may not need that, but you are going to need a 17mm wrench or socket. Now normally you can go ahead and put a socket on here and use your impact gun and zip it off. In most cases, it's going to spin the shaft with the nut. So you're going to put a wrench on here. You're going to hold this with a number 5 Allen key. We have it on a ratchet. Now we did spray ours down with some rust penetrant. Let it soak for a little while. Sometimes you can use a little bit of heat if you need to. Spin that nut off, push that through. I like to go ahead and throw the nut back on here and then just set that aside. On the bottom here, we want to go ahead and separate our lower ball joint from our knuckle. In order to do so, you're probably going to find a cotter pin here, and we need to remove that. There's usually a little spring clip on the front side. Use your cotter pins. You want to go ahead and replace these ideally. So we're going to remove that. Now that we have our cotter pin out, we're going to use an 18mm wrench on here. And we want to go ahead and loosen this. So we had to apply some heat to the nut here, and then we put some rust penetrant on it. And you can see I'm wiggling the nut back and forth to try and clean the threads as we go. Now you want to go ahead and remove that nut the rest of the way. We're going to give ours a few minutes to cool off. Now that we removed our nut, we're just going to throw that back on just a few threads. Just like that. Now on the rear of our control arm, we have a 19mm bolt right here. You can use our impact gun, loosen and remove that. On the front portion of our control, we have a 22mm bolt. Now we're going to use a swivel socket on this here due to clearance on the front portion of the frame. I'm going to work this back and forth to clean up those threads. Now right now we have our 2 inboard bolts removed and we have our nut on the ball joint just kind of resting there. So we're going to use a pry bar. I'm going to come on in here and we want to go ahead and try and get some mobility out of this. We want to go ahead and try and work this control arm out. And come around to the back side. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to just use the pry bar to try and shift that out like so. Now you want to be aware things can shift here. So we have that back part of the control arm out. Come on over here. And we're just going to work this until we can get this pulled out. We're going to go ahead and undo the nut here. Now that we have the nut off, let's go ahead and pry that ball joint up and out. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going to put my pole jack underneath my brake rotor just to raise up our suspension a little bit. Now keep in mind that our rotor has the 2 screws holding the rotor to the wheel hub. If you do not have the screws securing the brake rotor to a wheel hub, go ahead and put on a couple lug nuts to go ahead and secure that in place. Now we're not going to be lifting the vehicle. We're just going to be compressing our suspension a little bit. That's going to give us some clearance. Now let's go ahead and work this control arm out. You want to pay attention to the surfaces where the control arm is going to fit into. I'm going to simply use a bristle brush here. You can use a larger brush if you want. I'm just going to go ahead and scale this. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses when doing something like this. And then don't forget to do the front ones as well. Now what we're going to do is, ideally, we're going to try and get that back in there first. Once we get the back up into the body, I want to try and swing this around and get that lined up. Now I'm using a dead blow hammer here. It's a rubber mallet. Now ideally, we want to try and get this lined up, and this is actually pretty close. What we're going to do is we're going to use a screwdriver to go ahead and pry that up, get that to line up. Now you never want to start bolts like this here with a power tool. You should be able to work this a little bit. Now the other thing we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and stretch our control arm down and get our ball joint inside this. Now that we have the ball joint stud lined up, let's go ahead and focus on the bolts on the inside. Now that we get that bolt started, a few threads, we're still going to just use our hand ratchet to go ahead and run that in a bit. We're going to leave about a 1/2 inch. We don't want to snug that down. We still want to have some flexibility here until we get that rear bolt installed. Now we're going to do the same here. You can go ahead and use your screwdriver to go ahead and get that lined up. Use your pry bar. We just need to manipulate this. Now what we're doing is we're going to put our pole jack underneath our control arm, right underneath the brake rotor. We want to go ahead and raise this up, and ideally what we want to do is have this control arm start to level out, and that's going to help us line up where our bolt is going in. Now what we did was we went ahead and we secured a securing strap here, a ratchet strap around the control arm here. We're gently pulling this back. That's going to help us line up the bolt hole here. Now we didn't tighten that yet. What we're going to do is we're going to release our securing strap here. What we want to do is we want to torque these. The reason why we want to torque this in its compressed position is that this is a preload. So at this point here, this is where the vehicle would be at ride height on the vehicle or on the ground with the tire installed. Now, if we torque this with it drop down and then we put the vehicle on the ground and it raises up, it's going to preload these bushings and it's going to cause erratic riding, bouncing, stiffness, and it could cause alignment issues as well. So compress the suspension up to where the vehicle just starts to come off of our jack stands, or in our case, our lift. We're going to torque these, then we can go ahead and lower this down. Now let's go ahead and torque that bolt to 83 foot-pounds. Now let's go ahead and torque that down to 119. That's 119 foot-pounds. At this point, we can now lower our jack from underneath our control arm. Now you want to pay attention to the holes in the ball joint stud. These are for your cotter pin. You notice the notches in our nut here, so I want to pay attention to that. Go ahead and get that started. And then using our 19mm wrench, let's go ahead and snug that down. Now I want to torque this down to 69 foot-pounds. And we're doing so using a crow's foot on our torque wrench. Now you want to pay attention to the notch in your castle nut. Make sure it lines up with the hole in the ball joint stud. If it does not, continue to tighten the nut until the next slot opens up. And our cotter pin is hitting the knuckle, so we're just going to use a flathead screwdriver and just kind of bend that up so we can work this in a little bit further, like so. Ideally, you just need to bend over one tab. Then use your cutters to cut off the excess. Now we installed our grease gun. We want to go ahead and grease up our ball joint here. Now a greasable ball joint is a maintenance item. Normally something like this, you want to go ahead and add grease to it. Usually every oil change or every other oil change. Just fill it up until the boot swells up a little bit. You don't want to fill it up so that the boot explodes and grease blows out. That means you compromise the seal. Go ahead and remove that. Now I want to go ahead and install our sway bar end link up into our strut here, but you can see it's a little bit too low. So we're going to use our pry bar on our control arm and gently pry up on this here, and it's going to give us some adjustment here. Bring that up and just pull that in. Go ahead and get that nut started. Now we did spray it down with some rust penetrant, as well as we put some anti-seize compound on there. I want to go ahead and tighten this down. We're going to remove our pry bar. I'm going to go ahead and torque this down to 40 foot-pounds. Go ahead and grab your wheel, line that up. We'll install our lug nuts. Once we have all of these started, we'll go ahead and snug those down. Let's now go ahead and torque down our lug nuts to 94 foot-pounds. When doing this, you want to do it in a crisscross or star pattern. You're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.